All right, so first of all, today we're going to be talking about migrating from Spring 3 to Spring 4. And we're going to be doing some live demos there at the end of how to take advantage of some of the new-ish Spring 4 features. So about me, my name is Phillip Verheyden. I am at Phillip Universe on pretty much everything that you can have a tag on, including GitHub, Twitter. I currently work at Broadleaf. That's a picture of me last week at the Colbert Report that I was pretty proud of because it was really awesome. So, and then that's also me. I feel like I should win the prize for best speaker picture for me on the on the playground there because I don't know. I think that was pretty unique. Also, just a shameless plug. So Broadleaf Commerce is where I work, and we are based on Spring. We are an open source e-commerce framework. We are on GitHub, and we would love for you guys to try us out. There's a demo site. If you go to the website there, broadleafcommerce.com, you can actually download the demo and run it on your own machine and try it out, play around with it a little bit. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from success or failures that you might have. So please reach out to us with that. I'm also going to be, my demo is going to be based off of our demo site, which is the Heat Clinic. So you'll get a chance to see a little bit what that looks like. Okay, so the way this talk is going to go is that I'm first going to talk about just upgrading software in general and what that actually means and why you should or shouldn't. And then I'm going to talk about the Spring 4 upgrade specifically. I'm going to talk a little bit about dependencies, and then we're going to finish up with taking advantage of some of the new-ish features, like Java configuration and Websockets. Is anybody using Java configuration here? Just show of hands. Okay, so actually about half of the room. Okay, maybe a little bit less, maybe about a third. We weren't, and especially with the advent of Servlet 3. Well, the Servlet 3.0 was released a long time ago, but Spring that's what they're officially recommending now, especially if you want to use things like WebSockets. So we're going to go over a little Java configuration and how to convert like your web.xml and some of your application context XML files over to Java configuration and what that looks like. And then we're going to look at an implementation in a real web application of WebSockets. So here's just a warning. There are going to be a lot of opinions on this next slide. So if you don't agree with them, then that's fine. You can yell at me on Twitter. Again, I am at Phillip Universe. So feel free to do that if you want. So in my mind, the real reason that you invest in technology upgrade or migration at all, one of the biggest reasons to me is for talent acquisition and retention. If you look at where new ideas and new development is going, there's a lot of really awesome, great development in Java with Spring now. But we kind of got in a bad rap, honestly. That statement, nobody ever got fired for choosing, you can fill in the blank there, it's IBM. That is actually what I think is perfectly encapsulates a lot of things that are wrong with the Java ecosystem. And I hope that it seems like that with the advent of Java 8, with all the new stuff and taking advantage of new programming models, new ways of thinking, I hope that we'll end up as industry leaders in innovation and design, which I think actually, since you all are already on Spring, that's I think a step in the right direction. But with talent acquisition and retention, if you look at where a lot of new talent is going in the marketplace, a lot of it, the innovation is in JavaScript. We've got a lot of innovation in the DevOps community. Going back to JavaScript, I mean, there are two build tools, Grunt and Gulp, that were created, and huge communities of followers evolved around them within a year's time. So Grunt came out in 2012. Gulp came out in 2013. If you compare that to kind of the Java ecosystem, there were about 5 years in between Ant and then Maven and then finally Gradle, if you look at it that way. And of course, some people might say, well, that just means that the JavaScript ecosystem is way too immature, and that the Java ecosystem is more stable and more safe to go with. But you could also look at it just in terms of where the innovation is going. The other thing, the next part is about stagnation and technical debt. This ties in a lot with new talent acquisition and retention. But debt is something that you have to pay off eventually, right? And if you don't, then your company ends up suffering. I read a book recently about, I highly recommend it, it's called The Phoenix Project. What it does, it made a statement in there about that every single company nowadays that sells anything, that does anything, technology has to be a core part of their business. A lot of times technology is seen as a cost center. Technology is seen as something that just consumes resources and doesn't really add any value. Everything's always broken. But nowadays, in 2014, every company is pretty much a technology company, no matter what you sell, no matter what you do. The other reason for migration and upgrading is that code you don't have to support. In terms of things always being broken, if it's not you that has to break it, then that you've got somebody else that you can rely on. In Broadleaf, I'll talk a little bit about what that means with Broadleaf specifically and how that changes what we've done. But I think that the code that no longer we have to support is a really big win. There's a phrase not invented here, and how there is sometimes a fear of using somebody else's code. Hopefully, everyone here, since you're using Spring, open source community, open source framework, you don't really have those types of hangups. But for me, a lot of times I would much rather trust a community of thousands and thousands of users to test that code than code that I just randomly decided that I just thought up and wrote. The other reason are just supported versions. So with Spring specifically, they've officially deprecated the 3.1 line and the 3.2 line, actually. The 3.2 is only going to get incremental bug fixes. So you can stay on there if you want. 3.1 is officially deprecated. So is 3.0, actually. And 4.0. So there's been a lot of innovation around Spring, and they're trying to push everyone to move to this newer version. Is there anybody that's still on Java 6 here? Wow, okay, so over half the room. I don't know if you all knew this, but Java 6 was end-of-lifed last year. So fortunately, I guess that Spring still supports Java 6, even with Spring 4.1. But that it might be time to invest in an upgrade of your Java version. And then the final reason is new features. So there's a lot of cool new things that are happening in the Java ecosystem, with Spring specifically, but Java 8 with the advent of lambdas, with default methods, which are really cool. No more need for random abstract classes, and things like Websockets in Spring and Servlet 3.0. In my mind, a lot of these things make programming fun again. So it's difficult to get excited about your job if all you're doing is writing a bunch of super verbose XML configuration. But upgrading is always a balancing act. So a lot of times you can't just move to the new version and just redo everything that you've already done. Most of the time, you have to do an incremental upgrade, incremental migration. So I talked about things like code you don't have to support, things like that. A lot of times, that's not realistic. And one of the dangers you can get in with if you're always trying to be on the latest and greatest, you're always trying to be on the best updates, the newest features, you'll constantly be chasing that rabbit, and you'll never actually get anything done. I'll caveat what I said in the previous slide with that this is a very delicate balancing act, as you can see here. Okay, so Spring 4. So one argument for actually not upgrading Spring 4 is because if it isn't broke, don't fix it. However, what I will say is that according to Spring, if you are on versions of Spring 3, then it actually is, it's not going to be supported it's either not supported at all anymore, or it's not going to be supported for very much longer. And the way we did it at Broadleaf is really what I talked about when we talked about the balancing act. And the way that we did it is we first did an update, which I call sort of differentiate between an update and a migration, to where an update is where, okay, just make sure everything is compiling, make sure everything, my smoke test actually works. And then in subsequent passes, we can now start deprecating or removing some of the code that we've written in Broadleaf, and now we can do that all with just core Spring. Some of the examples that we have that we're actually using in Broadleaf that we're trying to migrate away from is, first of all, is XML configuration. So we actually, at Broadleaf, we have a very, very customized XML merge process to where, so basically, Broadleaf's been around since about Spring 2.5. We needed some sort of extension model for beans, and what was around then was XML. So we essentially invented a hierarchical merge extension process for all of your Spring application context files. However, now that we can use Java-based config, this has actually been around since Spring 3 again, but it's one of those things where we're kind of getting around to it now. We can start to use these extension patterns that that you can just use in Java, like subclassing. The other thing that we did, this is actually a really recent occurrence. In a slightly older version of Broadleaf, we essentially rewrote the Spring resource handlers, the HTTP resource handler, and we basically, if you look at what Broadleaf wrote and you look at what Spring actually has now in Spring 4.1, it's pretty much the exact same thing. I think that we're missing the resource transformers, but the resource loaders to the HTTP request handler, that we basically rewrote that. So that's something that we're in the process of migrating over to Spring 4.1. Okay, so other things before you actually update, these are like really good ideas. Unit tests, integration tests, and functional tests. I've actually bolded the integration tests and functional tests here because I think that when you're doing things like upgrading Spring and you're updating all of your application contexts, you're updating how beans might get configured and merged together, then what you really want is integration and functional tests. You want to be running in a live Spring container. You want Spring to be doing as much as possible so that you can try to work out kinks and bugs. I don't think unit tests are going to help you, but I don't think they're going to help you all that much, not in the same way that integration tests and functional tests will, for sure. Okay, so the migration guide on GitHub, I've linked it here in these slides. It's really good. There's a lot of good discussion about different Java technologies you might be using, like JSF. There's some notes about Glassfish and how doing some migration and upgrading there that you have to do to take advantage of Spring 4. The other thing is that with Spring 4.1 that just got released last week, this immediately supersedes anything in the 4.0 line. So if you upgrade to the 4.0 line, then you will be out of date. So you should immediately go straight from Spring 3 to Spring 4.1. And the too long didn't read of really this whole presentation, I guess, is that it's the upgrade and the migration process is not that bad. At first, when I first looked at it, I thought, oh, wow, Spring 3.2 to Spring 4, this is going to be a huge migration. This is going to be like a huge pain in my ass. I don't even know if I even want to do it. And then once I got into it and started actually doing the migration, doing the upgrade, it's actually not that different. There are a lot of like cool new features that you can take advantage of, but it didn't really, there wasn't a whole lot of breaking changes for sure. Okay, so dependent libraries. In general, Spring 4 recommends the versions released in 2010 and later. Again, that's 4 years ago, which is essentially an eternity in software development terms. Link to the full list there. That actually just links to the migration docs that was in the previous slide. One thing that might help you a lot is if you bring in the Spring I/O platform. So the Spring IO platform is something where you import it as a POM, and then it sets up all of the version numbers that you need in order to it sets up all the version numbers that Spring recommends you use for all of your dependent libraries. So so that could be something where you don't have to go look for all that stuff yourself, especially if there's like libraries that your new libraries that you want to bring in. Spring IO platform is a really cool way that Spring sort of solved this. How do I verify that that this dependent library is going to work with this version of Spring? What I will say though about the Spring IO platform is that it's not the gold standard. Just because it's not the version that you want to use is not on Spring IO platform doesn't mean that it won't work. The difference really here is that it will. It's just that the stuff that that Spring has tested with. JPA 2.0 is another big update, moving from 1.1 to JPA 2. Jackson 2, if you're using Jackson for any of your REST controllers, any of your object serialization, the Jackson 1 support is dropped in Spring 4.1. So since the recommendation is to go from just to skip 4.0 completely and go directly to 4.1, then that means that you're going to need to migrate your Jackson libraries. This is a little bit tricky, and I'll kind of go through those. I have a couple of slides on that on how to do that. Hibernate 3.6, they recommend Hibernate 4, but you can still use Hibernate 3 if you need to. The Hibernate 3 to Hibernate 4 is a little bit painful, but it's not too terrible. The other thing is Servlet 3.0. So Servlet 2.5 you can still actually deploy to, but you have to use the Servlet 3.0 spec if you want to use the Spring MVC tests at all. Is anybody using the Spring MVC test framework? Tester code? Okay, not a whole lot. That's a really cool project, I think. And so if you want to be able to make sure that your Spring MVC tests are accurate, then you might as well go ahead and target Servlet 3.0. And actually, what's cool about Servlet 3.0 is, talking about a kind of a tiered migration, is that your web.xml, you essentially just update your web app ID and which XSD you're targeting, and you're done. So as long as you're deploying to something like Tomcat 7, then that's really all you need to be able to support Servlet 3.0, which is really nice. So if you want to use WebSockets, it's not like you have to go through jump through a lot of hoops in order to make your Servlet APIs work. And then one other note, just again about Spring MVC tests. If you're not using it, then you should look at it and go back and look at some of the talks on the integration testing from this Spring 1 conference, because it is really, really, really cool stuff. Spring Security 3.2. The 3.1 from 3.2 migration was very, very simple. We were already on Spring Security 3.1, so upgrading that to 3.2 was really trivial. There wasn't really anything there. One note I will say about that is that one of the new features in Spring Security 3.2 is you can now it has better support for Java config. So if you're convinced by this talk that you want to ditch all of your XML and you want to move over to Java config completely, then you can do that with Spring Security 3.2. Another feature they added was CSRF filters, so cross-site request forgery. That's another area where Broadleaf, we sort of rolled our own implementation of that. So that will protect you against those cross-site request forgery attacks. Which is a nice feature of Spring Security. And then Thymeleaf, I guess is anybody using Thymeleaf? How many people are using Thymeleaf? Got 1.5 and 2. So Thymeleaf is really, really awesome. I can't stress that enough. That's what we use at Broadleaf. We ditch JSPs and we've never looked back. So we have some talks on YouTube about moving to Thymeleaf, and I really can't stress how much we've enjoyed using Thymeleaf. One of the big features we're using from there is resolving templates from the database. So I highly recommend Thymeleaf. Take a look if you haven't already. And then minimum versions for your servlet containers. are up here. We've got Tomcat 7, like some patch releases of Tomcat 6 and 7, and IBM WebSphere, Oracle WebLogic, Glassfish. Some of these, like WebLogic and WebSphere, you will need the JPA 2.0 pack, but all of those application servers can come with JPA 2.0 support. One note about Jackson, just a couple of things that really threw me off, was that when you actually migrate from Jackson 1 to Jackson 2, there's a complete maintainer change, which was very, very confusing. So you start looking, try to find like documentation on that, and it's really, really difficult to find. It changed from Codehouse to faster XML. I don't know all the history on that. I just know that that's what happened. And the biggest thing you'll have to do is simply reorganize your resources, and your package names will all change from org.codehouse.jackson over to com.fasterxml.jackson. And then you can, what this change basically did was modularized a lot of Jackson a lot better. There's sort of this this very weird way that Jackson, you had to bring in your Jackson dependencies, and you brought in dependencies that didn't really make sense. One thing that faster XML did was they sort of made all that kind of stuff make sense. We're using JAXB annotations with Jackson serialization. That's just out of the box. You can just declare the dependency, and then you're good to go. With JAXRS, there's a little bit more setup. So you have like a object mapper provider. This is a JAXRS term. And then you can, this is some Java config here about setting those init parameters to make sure that the Jackson libraries are scanned, and then also adding the JSON provider here. And then you can, also do the JAXB annotations, but serialize with JSON. Other things, XSD versions. If you're still using application contexts.xmls like we were, then you will need to update all of those. Either if you're targeting specific versions of the XSDs, you'll need to update those. Or you can just use the versionless version. I don't know if however many of you knew this, but if you can, all the Spring XSDs, you can do them without any versions. So you can just leave off the 4.1 completely, and you can just say like spring-context.xsd.
Question on Jackson.
Yeah.
So was there an API change between 1 and 2?
Yeah. So the question was there an API change between 1 and 2? There were a few small changes. The way that the biggest one was with Jersey, and how you actually had to Jersey got an object mapper. There were a couple of class files that moved. So like there were some enums that we were using for serialization for options that moved to different classes. And then there was one other API change where when you serialized when you were serializing some JSON, or sorry, deserializing some JSON, and it encountered nulls, it treated those differently. So it actually treated those. In previous versions, I believe it was a string literal null, and then in this version, it was actually, you got the actual object null back. And so that was a little bit of we had to do. But yeah, the biggest thing with Jackson was that it was the maintainer change and the whole dependency change. That was the biggest headache for sure. Okay, what things should you be taking advantage of right now, regardless of, without having to do any migration, without doing anything like that? So this talk is not really designed to go into all the other features of Spring. I feel like those are pretty well covered from this conference. The Java config, this would, I like to say with Spring 4, this is a great time to start using it if you're not using it already. If you actually go and look at Spring.io, the new website that they launched, almost all of the tutorials have either only Java config or Java config plus XML config. So you can actually see the big push for Spring to start to really heavily influence people to get rid of all their XML and start using Java config instead. And the really nice thing about Java config is that it's not, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So the statement was that you could also define your component annotations and then just do class path scanning and then do everything kind of auto-magically. That's true. You're right. And that's actually the statement that I was just about to make was that you can totally do that, and that's no problem. Some people, though, I think really like the declarative nature of your XML configuration. Sometimes it's a little bit more readable if there's not a whole lot of magic going on. So yeah, if you want to use the whole the class path scanning and add configuration, all that kind of stuff, that's fine. There's no problem with doing that. But this is sort of an intermediary between XML config and just everything being auto-wired and automatically instantiated everywhere. Answer your question? Okay. Spring Security 3.2, as I mentioned, auto CSRF protection, as well as better Java config. At-rest controller, there are a lot of convenience annotations. At-rest controller is one of them. It will automatically add, it's a stereotype that, or a composable annotation that is composed of at-controller, and then we'll also add at-response body to all of your methods. So just another convenience thing that Spring is providing. Ordered list B injection, that's a big one that we're using, and I think a big one that a lot of people have been asking for. So you can, if you're using @order annotations on any of your beans and those are getting merged into lists, then those lists will respect that ordering that you provide there. Generic injection is another cool thing you can do where you can say @AutoWired and then it'll support that whole the generic syntax there. Versus if you have two repositories and you might instead the other way to do it is to call them by name specifically. And then also the Spring MVC test framework. Spring MVC test framework, seriously, check it out. It's awesome. I went to a talk on it and it kind of blew my mind. So definitely check out Spring MVC test framework. Okay, so now we're going to go look at some code. And hopefully the demo gods will be with me today. So the first thing that we're going to look at is some comparisons between web.xml and Java config. So we're going to actually go and move something from your web.xml and duplicate the configuration in Java config. And then we're going to do the same thing with the Spring context. And then I have an example of how you could take advantage of WebSocket support and how easy it is to bootstrap it onto your existing application. So we'll do that with the Broadleaf demo site. Okay, let me make this font a little bigger. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, can everybody see this okay? It's just playing in the back? Good? Okay, cool. All right, so what we've got here is we have an example web.xml. And in fact, this is what I was mentioning earlier, that if you don't want to do anything that I'm about to show you with Java config, and you just want to start using Servlet 3.0, as long as your web server supports it, the only thing you have to do is change this web app element. Change the version to 3.0, and then you change the namespace and schema locations to to this, and that's all you have to do. And so if you want to just, you got a web.xml that exists, you don't care about the Java config, and you want to start using sockets, then cool, this is all you have to do to start doing that. Okay, so let me pull up the companion to this. Okay. All right. Is that too high? All right. Okay, so let me actually pull this side by side. Not wanting to lock here. Sorry, this is not. Actually, I guess I can just do that. That's fine. Okay. Okay, so so I've got some stuff commented out here just because I have a slightly updated version of this that I'll show in just a second. So first of all, the main idea with Java config, and by the way, this is all Servlet 3.0 stuff I'm showing. So if you're not on Servlet 3.0, then you need to get to Servlet 3.0 in order to take advantage of this Java config. There's an interface called Web Application Initializer that you will need to implement, and that is what gives you that actually gives a method called on Servlet startup. In this example, I've actually extended from the abstract security web application initializer, which is what you should extend from if you're using Spring Security. So it's, like I said, with Spring Security 3.2, they enhance their Java config a lot. What this does is ensures that the Spring Security filter chain gets added first as the very first filter. Spring Security requires that, and so so if you're using this Java config, you will need to extend from this Spring Security class. You can add your own filters later too, but you need that to be, the Spring Security filter chain has to be first. Okay, so this class will look a little different. So there are a couple of related parts here in this web.xml that are sort of duplicated down here in the Java config. The first one is this patch config location, and as well as a listener that's in Broadleaf called the merge context loader. So I mentioned that in Broadleaf we have a very customized XML process. We've basically reinvented how to do extensions within XML. So in this case, this is another example of sort of a tiered migration, right? Like I want to take advantage of this new stuff. I still have some reliance on XML, and especially this merge configuration stuff. So this still supports that. So this merge context loader will actually be the one creating this merge XML web application context, but we're going to do that instead directly here. So we're adding the patch locations. This is actually the same thing as this patch config locations initializer parameter right here. And this is what our Spring root web application context will be. So so I have then added Spring Security gives you this before Spring Security filter chain. I overrode that because I need all this configuration to be in the root application context. I need that to be started up in time for Spring Security to register everything. So and then I'm adding the listener here. And then I'm just going through, really, I just went one by one through my web.xml and then added the stuff here that I needed. So, okay, so I've got another request context listener. I've got this character encoding filter. I've got like a log4j listener in here right there. I've got a HTTP session event publisher, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just adding here in Java config. And then I can add, and then I'm adding some init parameters to some of those. One other thing that that might make you a little bit more inclined to go with the XML configuration is that you can, like, if you're just in web.xml land, you have to write this like patch config location in Spring. It's context config location. If you misspell that, your whole app is broken, right? Java is great because Java has static typing. It's got a really powerful type system. So why not use it? Okay, so we have then created our dispatcher servlet. So if we look down at my servlet configuration here, which is here. Sorry, I went through and commented a bunch of this stuff out. So let me bring this down. Okay. So this is my Spring dispatcher servlet configuration here. And this is how that gets created. So the servlet context.add servlet to dispatcher servlet. And again, this is a very one-to-one mapping of exactly what we've got in the web.xml over to Java config. So I'm setting the init parameter again. I can use an actual something here that actually makes sense. So I don't have to worry about misspelling. I can have the compiler actually do that stuff for me. And then I'm adding in my two application contexts that I have here, and setting a lit on startup. And then I'm also starting up a Jersey servlet. So Jersey for JaxRS, we're using Jersey and JaxB, excuse me, for all of our REST APIs in Broadleaf. And so that's how that works. One nice thing, if you're already using Jersey and you're using Spring, then you can continue to use the Spring-Jersey package to actually get all of your component scanning in your JaxRS components. So that's really nice. Yes? It was an old decision that we made at Broadleaf, and it's kind of stuck around. The question was, by the way, why are we using Jersey, and why are we not just using the Spring REST APIs? And it was just sort of a decision it was a decision that we made. As far as if we have plans to move over to Spring for our REST APIs, I don't know. But it was a decision that we made. Okay, so I've got my mapping here, and then after Spring Security Filter Chain, this is where you can add in your custom filters. So as you saw in my web.xml above here, I've got my Spring Security Filter Chain filter that's automatically added by token of me extending from that abstract Spring Security class. But then I also needed to add this custom filter, this character encoding filter as well. So that's how that's done. Okay, so this is like baseline. So I talked about like sort of a tiered upgrade and like a path. You take multiple passes at your upgrade and migration. So this is sort of like pass one, right? But now we can start to do other things, right? So let's look at version 2 of this. Okay. All right, so version 2 of this is actually really similar. So I've still got the same root web application context for Spring here. This is more of a broadleaf requirement than anything else. So I've still got my root web application context done in the same sort of XML merging process here. However, what I've customized is the dispatcher servlet. So I have created an annotation config web application context. And then registered, and then I've actually explicitly registered here an at configuration component. So and then I create the my actual servlet, create that with the web context that I created here. And again, just to show the difference, if we go look back at what we had was we were using the context config location. And actually doing merging ourselves. Okay, so again, we started at web.xml. Now we've got some Servlet Java config, and now we've also got some Spring Java config. So let's go into that. Let's see what that looks like. So again, another mixing of we're importing a resource here from the class path. We're importing that Broadleaf application context here, and then let me pull up this equivalent. Application context servlet. Okay, so, all right. Sorry, demo gods mostly shined on me, but did not uncomment these lines. So this is what our application context servlet configuration looked like before, and we're again duplicating that here in our servlet initializer. Okay, so all of my component scans, I've got 4 different component scans here, and then I am scanning those here in as well in my configuration. I needed to. There's a part in here where I'm doing an override. This is sort of again more particular to Broadleaf than anything else, and how we do some of the bean merging. But I needed to, mainly because the override process that happens, if you have two beans with the same name, then it won't work. So I needed to exclude that and sort of do that a little bit more manually. And we'll see that here in a second. Okay, so this component scan as well. AOP config is turned on by default. So then we're just going down the list here. So I've got my resource handlers, and those are here in this part. Okay, yeah, this is not going to be nice. Okay, so here I've added my resource handlers. And oh, by the way, I'm extending from WebMVC configurer adapter, and that's what gives me all of these methods. So because I've annotated this with that configuration and enable WebMVC, then I can. I'm extending from this WebMVC configurer adapter that gives me a bunch of these methods that I'll be implementing, and then I added my own methods to register some custom beans that I needed. So if we go back to Servlet initializer. Okay, so we've got our MVC resources. Resource locations are here, so imfonts and favicon.ico. This looks actually really, really similar to everything. I've got a couple of custom interceptors here in my MVC interceptors method. And so I'm adding those here. I am also configuring my Thymeleaf view resolver. So that's how this is set up here, this XML configuration. So I've got, and then I'm actually creating a bean here. So I've got a bean called Thymeleaf view resolver, and then that's where I'm instantiating it and setting all these properties here, and then especially the layout map. This is another example of, without having to hard type the word none in all caps and know that has this like weird special meaning that isn't really well documented unless I wrote a custom XSD for it, which I would not want to do. Then I can just use normal Java patterns for getting static strings. Let's see what else. So this is what I was mentioning earlier about how Broadleaf sort of rewrote the way Spring handles resources, and that's what this configuration is doing here. We've got this BLJS resources and CSS resources. Those are bean names that actually do. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you're right. I believe I thought that I had this in here, and I do not. Okay, I don't know where that went. Yeah, you can do that with @in. Yeah, okay. I think you might be right. Yeah. I don't think you're right. I think that you can, well, actually, no, I think because add bean doesn't do any auto wiring at all, right? And so I think that you have to add the add inject or the auto wire by name. Is that right? Oh, okay. Okay. Does anybody have no? The question was about doing the automatic bean wiring. Does anybody have an answer? No, definitively, if that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you might be right, and there might be a way to duplicate to turn on that configuration that I'm not sure about. Good question though. Okay. And then I'm going through and setting up my different beans for page handler mappings, for different handler mappings that we use in Broadleaf. So page handler mappings, category handler mapping, product handler mapping, that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's cool. So let's see. Let me go back to here. Undo all this stuff. Okay, so sorry if that was a little bit of a review from maybe Spring 1 last year, but it sounded like there might have been some people that got some value out of going through that. The next thing that I wanted to show you was Websocket support. So that's actually really exciting, and let me get to a state that I'm actually happy with. Okay. Okay, so if we look at what we've got here in Broadleaf, okay. Okay, so the goal of this part now is to show, we talked about some migration to Java config, and now we're going to talk about how easy it is to take advantage of some of these new Spring 4 features like WebSockets in this real application. So what we've got here is we've got a product details page. What I want is the ability for checking inventory here. So if we look at so Broadleaf ships with an admin that I can go and modify some of this stuff. So log back in, session expired. So if I go to my inventory and I set this to unavailable, then I can, and if I refresh this page, let's see, did I do this on the right one? Okay, let's take check quantity. Okay, so this is how it displays when we've got a when this user just comes to the page and we're out of stock. So one way that we could fix this if we weren't using sockets is if we wanted to show them dynamic updates, is we could give them a button to say, hey, is this inventory available at this time? But what we're going to do instead is we're going to actually add something to where this will automatically update this page to say, hey, somebody's like buying stuff, you better hurry up and buy because there's not much left. Okay, so the way that we do that, so we've got our, okay, so the first thing that we do is we want to add the WebSocket support for, dependency for Spring. So just as quick, this is, again is very specific to this application. It ships with 3 Maven modules, admin, core, and site. Each of these 3, we've got admin and site. These both build wars, so they're different war applications. And then we have core that builds a jar that's shared between each one. So we share domain objects, the configuration I'm about to show you, that kind of stuff. Okay, so if we look at first our dependencies. So I needed to add Spring WebSocket as well as Spring messaging. So the reason that we needed to add both of these is because what we're going to do is add something to where when a user checks out, then that checkout process is going to send a message via Stomp over to a listening WebSocket. So with messaging, and that's going to be done outside of like the servlet context and inside of like a root application context. So messaging, we're using Stomp for that message bus. Okay, so if we look at our WebSocket initializer, I have an app configuration component that says enable WebSocket message broker. This is what actually gives me the ability to do stuff with Stomp and to send messages to various clients that are listening via the WebSocket endpoints. So what I did was I've got, again, annotated this with that configuration, and then I've enabled the WebSocket message broker, and then I'm extending from this abstract class, abstract WebSocket message broker configurer. Okay, so I've got a comment here that you don't actually need to put an application destination prefix here. You can, all you really need is this enable simple broker. The string that I picked /topic, this is not anything that you have to, this is just sort of a convention more like. If you have this sort of pub sub model where you've got a publisher and then you've got a bunch of subscribers, which is the model that we have. And this is just, again, just kind of convention with how Spring recommends doing WebSockets and Stomp. And then I've also got a Stomp endpoint that I wanted to register here. So I've got this endpoint called Broadleaf, and then I'm also enabling sock.js. So sock.js, really important if you're doing WebSockets because sock.js will have graceful fallback to earlier browsers like IE. And I actually, there are more details about what that actually means and what that does. I'm sure in all the WebSocket talks, I think there have been a couple this week that you can work with. So, but that's required since we're going to use sock.js on the front end. Okay, so then we're going to look at how we're actually going to send the message. So. Okay, so just a little bit more context that you need to know for how this works. Broadleaf implements something, has this idea of a checkout workflow. So you go through various activities to complete checkout. So for instance, decrement inventory activity is one of them that we're actually sort of going to be relying on for this to actually work. So, sorry, just wanted to make sure we can see this. So this is, it's not annotated here because again, some of the reliance on XML configuration, but trust me, this is a bean. It's a real bean that gets mapped and added into the Broadleaf checkout workflow. And it's one of the very last activities that gets run. And the whole job of this is to just send a message to all listening subscribers. So this convert and send method, what you needed to do was you sort of have to have the same. It has to start with the same thing that your initializer starts with on your enable simple broker here. So your destination prefixes is what you always have to prefix. So probably should have made that like a static string somewhere. So one cool thing though here is that what I wanted to implement is something where you've got a user sitting on the product details page, and they're only subscribed to that specific product detail, right? So the only thing I care about when I'm a user and on this page is all I care about are events for this sudden death sauce guy. Okay, so here is just I'm going through the order. I am invoking this inventory service here to give me what the new quantity is, and then I'm going to display that on the page. So, and I'm actually, sorry, this is sending over the message bus to display that. One thing I wanted to note, I've done no setup of Rabbit. I've done no setup of any sort of like JMS, anything. I've done none of that kind of stuff. This is all very simple, very like baked in, so there's no other moving pieces that you're not really seeing as far as like other components that are active. Okay. So, and then, so I've got my configuration, my WebSocket initializer, and then I've got my activity within the checkout workflow that says when a user checks out, I want to send messages to say that, hey, we've got this updated inventory here. Okay, so let's go back and look at what the front end code looks like. It's actually really simple. So this is going to produce, okay, this is a little bit. Yes? I don't. I don't. It's something that's kind of opaque, and you don't like. The headline is that you don't have to care. Sorry. The question was, do you know what type of message broker it uses behind the scenes? And I do not. I haven't looked at all the ways that. Yeah, but you can set up multiple ones, different ones that like your Rabbit, JMS, all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure all the internals of how this works. There's actually a talk, there's one talk that talked about a lot of the internals this week on WebSockets, and that would be the talk to look at, and I'm sure they go into all that kind of detail. But again, the headline is that I just want to get some WebSocket support here, and I don't want to set up a bunch of infrastructure, but I can just do that. Okay, so 2 snippets of JavaScript here required. By the way, this is Thymeleaf code, so yeah, so like CData and some of this kind of stuff, I'll talk about a little bit. So the first thing I did was add the dependency for sock.js, and then the next thing is I actually went and downloaded the stomp.js libraries and added those in my project. This is saying it's going to be pulling it from the project itself. And then now, in order to connect, then I'm going to instantiate my sock.js protocol with /broadleaf. And again, this sock.js, this endpoint that it's connecting to, is the same thing that I enabled here. So I'm adding an endpoint here to my stomp import registry called /broadleaf. And then on the front end, I'm actually subscribing to, sorry, where'd I go? Subscribing to the same thing, /broadleaf. I'm subscribing to that. This here is actually, so this is like the product details page that gets built. This like commented kind of, excuse me, commented kind of syntax is Thymeleaf at work, and so that's evaluating the expression product.id to display it, to save that here in JavaScript. So it's processing this from the Spring model. That gets instantiated, and then so it actually works out to where in JavaScript you'll actually get what the value of the product ID is. Okay, so my Stomp client, I'm putting it over the socket that I created, and then I've got my connection. So then within this inner block, I'm saying I want to subscribe to this /topic/inventory /product ID. And if we look back at our activity, our send order inventory updates activity, then you can see that I'm actually sending a message to topic/inventory/product ID. And again, in my product.html page, that's what I'm subscribing to here. So and then of course in my what I'm sending is what I'm sending is just the quantity, and so like I don't have to. It's going to be just in the message body. So this also supports Jackson serialization. So if you want to send a complex object, it'll serialize it over JSON, and then you'll have that available to you if you want to send a more complex object over the wire. Okay, so. Going back to product, so what I'm doing is here is saying when I get a message, then I'm going to log it to the console, and then I'm going to start updating my page. So if I've got the quantities, in regard to the quantity, so I'm going to say, hey, somebody just purchased this product. There's only some left. There are no items left, and then if there aren't any items left, then I'm going to hide the add to cart button and show that out of stock button that we just saw. Okay, so go back to Chrome. All right, so if we go back to the Broadleaf admin, I'm going to show you how this works. Okay, so inventory, check quantity. I'm going to give it a quantity available of, let's just start with 3. And refresh, so now I should say, so I've got three sudden death sauce, hot sauces available. And if we look at our console, if we look to our console, then we can actually see, this is like just some debugging information that that WebSocket spits out. It says, okay, I've got opened a WebSocket here. I'm listening. I've subscribed to /topic/inventory/1. So that's the ID that's the product ID here that we saw in JavaScript. So we're subscribed there. We haven't done anything, so it's just passive, right? It's just waiting to hear something back. So I'm going to open. I've got a new browser here, and let's see if this is going to be nice and display it all at once. Okay. So we'll look at that. I'm going to make this smaller. Okay. So over here, so I've got the same available inventory showing up. I'm going to go to buy. So in the demo site, that looks like this. I'm going to go and check out. Okay, so checking out this guy, put in my email address. Sorry, this is a little bit laborious. Okay, billing information, it's fine. Okay. And okay, 11:14, cool. Okay, now, so what should happen is when I hit checkout, if we look at it from what's happening behind the scenes, when I hit this checkout button, I've got a subscriber here listening for updates for this particular product, right? When I hit checkout, I'm going to pass through the Broadleaf checkout workflow, and one part of that checkout workflow is to send a stomp message through the message broker to anything listening to /topic/inventory/1. So demo gods be with me, and hit checkout, and there we go. So now we've got an update where somebody just purchased this product. We've only got 2 items left. So you can see some of the logging information here down below for Stock.js. You can see what we got back. So we got back the quantity of 2. Let's buy another one. So if we buy one more. Another one of these guys. And then now we should, the message will change slightly because there is 1 instead of 2. Okay, so hit checkout, and I should see something else update here on the front end again. Cool, so somebody just purchased it again. There's only 1 item left. Personally, I feel like this is a great use of the blink tag, but unfortunately, it's not available in the latest version of Chrome here. I checked. Okay, so if we go back and check out one more time, then what I expect to see is the, so I've got one guy left, and what I expect to see is that now we have, we're showing out of stock. Sorry about all this checkout stuff. Maybe I should have registered a customer beforehand. Okay. Okay. So now, if I hit checkout, then I should see this a few more things on this page update. Cool. So now I've got, okay, I'm out of stock, and somebody just purchased it again, and there's no more left, frowny face. So, okay, so that is sort of the end of what I wanted to show you. So let me go back to my keynote presentation here, and okay. Okay, so what did we learn? So, in my opinion, upgrading is really good. There's a lot of value in order to upgrade. The nice thing about Spring 4 is that you don't have to do this like huge replatform in order to take advantage of these cool new features that Spring 4 has to offer. It's really, really good for backwards compatibility, and it's also sort of future-proofs you. Like if you want to use Java 8, if you want to use any of that kind of stuff, then you can start to take advantage of that immediately. Tiered feature upgrades might be the best option. So I mentioned things with like the Servlet, the Spring Security 3.2 filter, some of this Java config stuff that sounds like a lot of people still haven't quite updated yet. Things like the resource handling stuff. That sort of tiered upgrade is probably what makes the most sense. We also saw some Java config with actual Java extension patterns. And then finally, we talked about the simple, like real-world WebSocket support and how easy it is that once you sort of do in this tiered migration and once you just get to Spring 4, how easy it is to start adding on these new features. So that's it. Are there any questions? Yes.
So one of the things I've been really interested in is scaling real-world WebSocket support.
Okay.
Through things like load balancers and things like that.
Yeah.
Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
So the question was scaling with WebSocket support and how to go from simple to complex. And unfortunately, I cannot because I do not know that information. So sorry about that. Yeah. Did anyone go to the WebSocket support talk about like the deep dive into WebSockets? Anybody here? Okay. I wonder if they might talk about some of that kind of stuff. Yeah. But that's a good like next talk. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Again, I'm Phillip. I work at Broadleaf at Phillip Universe. If you have any other questions or if you're interested in Broadleaf, then let me know. Oh, by the way, sorry. If anybody, I had this so I wouldn't forget. If anybody wants to take a picture of me and you, like a selfie, and then tweet it to @Broadleaf, then you get a free mug. So the first person that comes up and does that, you get this really awesome Broadleaf Commerce coffee mug. So, all right, thanks everybody.